The world is changing fast. New technologies, shifting social landscapes, and evolving ways of living can feel both exciting and overwhelming. So, how do we find balance? I'm Stephanie von Bismarck, activist, author, and digital educator. Welcome to my podcast, How Do We Manage? So in this podcast, we like to explore the messy, beautiful, and often unpredictable ways we manage our minds, our work, and our world. And the guest to this episode is someone who doesn't just move through life, he moves others. Charlie Dark is a poet, DJ, educator, mentor, and the founder of Run Dem Crew, a global running collective built not on pace, but on purpose. He's also a deeply thoughtful advocate for mental health, community, and creativity, especially among young people and marginalized voices. Born and raised in 1970s Peckham, London, Charlie's story is one of transformation, of moving through spaces where he didn't quite fit, and turning those experiences into fuel for inclusion, expression, and connection. Whether behind the decks, on the streets of London, or speaking to audiences across the world, Charlie reminds us that joy, movement, and vulnerability aren't luxuries, they're necessities. In this conversation, we talk about growing up as an outsider, finding healing through running, the power of community, and how to stay inspired after decades of doing what you love. And of course, he shares his mixtape moment, which is something you don't want to miss. Let's go into it. Charlie Dark, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
We have listeners from all over the world, and I know that you grew up in Peckham. Is that South London?
Yes, I did.
And for anyone who's listening from the outside, why was that special at the time?
I think Peckham in the 70s and 80s was very different from how it is now, because obviously gentrification has swept through South London, so it's a very different area. But back then, very working class, super multicultural, lots of different influences to take from as a young child and teenager. Could be dangerous at times, but quite a nurturing environment where people really looked out for each other and cared for each other. And it was, an interesting place to grow up. And it gave me a lot of, ideas and principles that I've kind of carried through life.
What kind of principles, for example?
Self-resilience.
Self-resilience.
And individuality.
That's
the two
great.
things that I learned from growing up in that area.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's something very positive out of it. And what kind of reputation did Peckham have at the time?
At one point, it was like a no-go area.
Oh.
Where when you told people that you lived in Peckham, they would just be like, well, I'm not coming to visit you.
Oh, gosh.
I might not make it out alive.
Okay.
But, like most areas that have been like that, gentrification has arrived and it's a very, very different place now from what it was then, because I grew up on the borders of Peckham and East Dulwich, so I kind of straddled two areas.
And then I read that you went to a very sort of elitist private school called Lanes.
Yes,
Tell me a little bit about that. How was that for you? How did that happen?
Well, basically, there were kind of two school options in my area. You could either go to William Penn, where generally most of the kind of kids went, but that's where the bad boys went. And then there was Allane's, which was a private school in Dulwich. And my parents are really into education. My grandfather was a headmaster. My mother's kind of had a very kind of illustrious career in education. And so she made the decision that she wanted me to go to this school. And in the early 80s, the assisted play system kind of got introduced into the school system, where they were trying to kind of get more inner city kids to kind of go to private schools. And so I managed to get an assisted place to go. I took the entrance exam and I went and I found myself there. And again, another interesting experience, very much fish out of water. I was one of a handful of kids of colour in the school in the whole time I was there. But, I really, it kind of challenged me, but I found my voice. And I definitely had some opportunities there that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't gone to the school. And it's kind of given me a knowledge of how the other half lives and how to navigate that world, which I think is really important.
So you took a great deal of balance from this experience of where you lived and then where you went to school.
Yeah, I've always been one of those kids. People always said when I was growing up, he's not black enough to hang out with the black kids, and he's not white enough to hang out with the white kids. So he's an individual. So you find yourself being an outsider. But what it means is you can float through different social groups.
Yeah.
And make friends with lots of different types of people.
Yeah.
And I've always been one of those kids. And then when music came into my life, then suddenly the whole world opened up.
Is that something that started in that school?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely. What happened in the school is you had people who'd come from privilege, which meant they were having birthday parties, large birthday parties. And a large birthday party at some point is going to require a DJ.
Yes.
And so there was assumption that because I was one of the only kids of colour in the school, that I knew more about music than I actually did.
Okay.
So what that taught me is when an opportunity arrives, say yes and work out how to land the plane afterwards.
So somehow a prejudice actually served you well in this moment.
Yeah, most definitely. And I wouldn't say it was an easy time because the 80s was rife with racism and, there was a lot of bullying. There's a lot of discrimination. You have to work twice as hard. And it was a hard experience. But it gave me a tough skin. And so not many things faze me. And I always say to people is kind of, school days can be some of the hardest days of your life.
Oh, kids can be so cruel.
They can be really, really cruel.
Yeah.
And teachers can be really, really cruel as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, I survived and I came out of it and, I'm really happy that I went. In hindsight, I'm not really happy. And maybe there was probably a period of time when I wasn't too happy that I was there. But definitely in hindsight, I'm glad that I went.
You have so many hats on. You're a DJ, you're a poet, you're a mentor, you're a founder.
Yep.
How do you balance all of that and without sort of burning out?
I always say to people that I probably am one of those kids who had ADHD but didn't know.
Yeah.
Was never zone. So I was always kind of flitting from one thing to another. It's just, I think as a DJ, you learn how to balance multiple things at the same time. Because whilst people are dancing to the record that's playing,
you're thinking
6 records ahead. And what that teaches you is this ability to kind of do multiple things at once, but make it seem smooth and easier than it actually is. And it's just kind of, I get bored when I'm just doing one thing for a long period of time.
Oh yeah, I'm like you there.
There's too many things in the world to explore.
Yeah, and too many cool things to do.
Exactly.
But you sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, but you sort of said you moved away from the career as DJ path and really wanted to focus on music as joy and joyful. How does that work in an industry that actually is really tough?
Well, what happened to me is I got burnt out by the industry.
Oh, all right.
And chewed up. And, had a situation where we were dropped from our major label deal and kind of a deep depression kind of slowly started to follow. And this idea that you've kind of dedicated all of this time for this dream that didn't materialize how you thought it would and then gets taken away from you. And then you have to restart again, but you don't know where to restart because that's all you've done for the last 20 years of your life. And so I found myself in a place where kind of I was really disillusioned with the music industry and I kind of walked away from it at a time that I found wellness and running. And, I always say to people is like, when I'm in the running and wellness world, I'm around people who are kind of very much about growth, progression, striving to be the best they can be.
Forward. Pushing
things forward. Music industry is very much about let's keep things how they are. And you meet a lot of negative people, unfortunately, in the music industry. And
why is that so, you think?
Because it's a music business in reality. And it is an industry for a reason. And an industry is about making money, making as much product as possible, being quite ruthless, churning people out. And, that's just the nature of the industry. And also, I think, at the time that I was heavily in the industry, it was also about excessiveness. Who can take the most drugs? Who can drink the most? Who can stay up the longest? Who can party the hardest? And that was seen as a sign of success. Who can spend the most money?
Has that changed anyhow? You remember these times you were the coolest if you don't need any sleep.
Yes.
Okay. If you now listen to the modern science is telling us more and more how important sleep is. Mm-hmm. Do you think that has also that has also changed within the music industry?
I think it's definitely changing.
Yeah.
I think people are realizing that you will get burnt out unless you take care of yourself. They're realizing that health is wealth. And, definitely with a lot of the younger artists that I see, they are much more conscious of their health, what they're putting inside their body, how they're spending their time, who they're spending time with, the energy that they spend time around than any was in my era. So there's definitely change coming. But I always look at it as like the music industry is like a very large cruise ship. So it takes a long time to turn left.
Yeah. They can't maneuver.
And that's like any big business. It takes a long time because you've got to get so many people on board to make the decision to make the change.
I know. In my line of work, I always just compared it to I'm the speedboat group. I don't like to be on that tanker.
No. Yeah. The luxury liner looks really exciting from the outside, but once you're on it, it can be, a bit detrimental.
The small and fast is more our thing.
Small, fast, and agile is the way forward.
And now let's go into that running. You founded Run Dem Crew. We're going to talk about that. But how did this entire running actually come to you?
So there were multiple things happening in my life around 2005, 2006.
Okay.
Birth of my first child.
How many children do you have?
I've got 3 children.
Okay.
Soon to be 21, soon to be 18, and a 9-month-old.
Oh, wow. A little one.
I got amnesia and then went back in again. One of the best things I ever did.
Oh, good.
I'm loving it right now. So 2005, 2006, I'm under pressure. I'm a new father. I'm trying to juggle my remaining time in the music industry, in an industry that's changing. CDs are coming in, digital is coming in, so the rise of social media, it's kind of, the world is slightly changing around me. And I kind of eventually got to the point where I was so low that I kind of reached out for help. So then you're in therapy, then you're on medication. And I just had a problem with taking a pill in the morning and waiting to be happy.
Yeah, I
found that really hard.
Yeah.
And I literally would sit there in the morning like, okay, I'm going to take you now and I'm going to wait for the happiness to arrive. And then I thought to myself, there's got to be other things that I can do to kind of help speed up the path to happiness. And at the same time, I got commissioned to write a one-man show about my musical experience. So I'm in rehearsals with no cardio fitness. And my director, Benji Reed, is kind of, optimum of health. He's one of those kind of like guys that's kind of, he's been the same shape his whole life. He's had a 10-pack his whole life. He's been full of energy his whole life. And he very honestly said to me, you're going to have to do something about your fitness. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to perform this show because you're playing all these different characters and then you've got to survive a tour. It was one of the first times in my life in a very long time that anyone had ever been honest with me. Because when you spend time in the music industry, eventually you're surrounded by a lot of yes people.
Oh, yes-sayers,
who are just kind of fanning your ego and basically, giving you this false sense of greatness. And he was like, you're not that great. And this is important. This is an important story that you need to tell. And unless you arrive to rehearsals in optimum health, I don't want to work with you.
Interesting.
And I was just like, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I would have.
I was like, wow, that's quite blunt. But I took it as a challenge. And I literally went home and I looked at my trainer collection, which was very big at that time. I just thought to myself, well, that pair of shoes, they were actually designed for running, but I've only ever worn them in the club. I'm going to go for a run. So Christmas Day 2006, I went out for a run around the park because I thought, if I run around the park and I tell people I ran around the park, that's going to sound really impressive.
Yeah.
And if I run on Christmas Day, which is the hardest day of the year to move, then that's kind of like showing the world that I'm serious about this.
Okay.
And I lasted 10 minutes and it was, a horrible experience, but I came home electrified.
Okay.
And I just was like, right, tomorrow I'm going to go and do it again. And the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. And eventually I got to the point where I was sneaking off to go and do races. I was doing secret training because I couldn't really tell anyone in my circle of friends that I was making this move of positivity. Eventually one of my friends was just like, okay, what's going on? Because you've changed. Your body's changing shape. You seem a bit more alive, a bit more in love with life. Whatever it is, bring me in. And I was like, well, I've been running at nights. because I'm too embarrassed to run in the daytime. I don't want anyone in my neighborhood to see me.
Okay.
And he was like, can I come with you? I was like, okay, cool, wicked, great. Friday night, before we go and DJ, let's go for a run. So we start doing that. And then eventually I go and run a race and I look around and I think to myself, I am loving this running life, but the people who need it most are not here.
Okay. Who are those?
People with lack of self-confidence, people who are going through struggles of their mental health, people who are looking for community, people who are looking for connection, looking for love, people who want to explore a city safely amongst other people, people who are looking for a sense of belonging. And I just thought to myself, right, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remix running culture so it's just a bit more open and welcoming to people from my music community. I'm going to call it Run Dem Crew because that's quite an exciting name and that's going to stand out.
Absolutely.
And we're going to design the merchandise so it looks cool. And we're just going to pick a time of the week and we're going to be consistent.
Sounds like a band, really, to me.
I
Somehow.
mean,
if you don't listen too closely,
Yeah. I kind of, as a DJ, you kind of learn this way of finding records that you are not supposed to work on a dance floor. And then that gives you the idea, like, well, there are certain ideas that should not work on paper, but if you keep pushing and you keep trying, eventually it becomes something in people's minds. And that was the thing. I just was basically, right, Run Dem Crew, let's go. Tuesday nights, 7:00, meet me at this destination and let's go for a run together. And slowly people started arriving and coming. And then we built the community. I built the community like a party.
So you also said that it was built for people who don't like to run.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't like to run. I'm a walker. I just can't run. My kids say I'm running like a penguin. So yeah. I would be welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. We welcome all levels because it's not about the running. That was the big thing that I realized.
Okay.
Is if you can talk about this, you can talk about everything else other than the running, and you can make this thing so it's not based on performance. It's based on showing up. And you create an environment where the fastest person supports the slowest person. And everyone's equal. Leave your ego at the door.
And how did that work in the moments where it sort of started growing more and more?
Just organically just grew and grew in word of mouth, because what I did was I incubated the idea for a year before I told anyone I was doing it.
Okay.
So that by the time people found out, it already had an established core of people who were kind of advocates. And they became like my street team. They were the people who were going out being like, you got to come to this Run Dem Crew thing. It's really exciting. I think you would really like it. And that's kind of just my way of doing ideas, which is slightly different from the way people do things now, because people do an idea now and then want to multiply and magnify it to as many people as possible on day one. And I always say to people, the best parties you go to are the ones where you discover the third room just as you're leaving the club.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
That's the way that's the principles I apply to it. And I just ignored everything that was running and was doing at the time. I was just like, I was taking my ideas from skateboarding, from BMXing, from parkour, from ultra sports, just anything other than running.
How that the running give you also mentally like an outlet and sort of a healing path that other exercises or sports wouldn't.
Running doesn't require a team. It can be done barefoot.
Yeah.
It doesn't really require equipment at its heart. And, you can go and run anywhere. And so what I think happens is through running, you start to learn that a big goal that seems impossible can be broken down into smaller, manageable parts, which is really good for your brain. It also shows you progression. And for people in the creative industries, I often say that our self-worth is often judged by our output. And we are outputting work for people who are less talented than us. And so often what happens is your self-esteem gets wrapped up in the reaction to whatever you're creating. Running doesn't require that, because running is kind of, your body starts to tell you whether you're doing well or not. Your body starts to tell you whether you need to work harder or work less. And it's a really empowering thing to have inside you, to unlock within you.
Yeah.
And again, it's like yoga, meditation, running. I'm just kind of like, they're really good for you because they unlock things in you that you didn't know you had. It's almost like unlocking a superpower that's been sitting inside you all of your life. And you've just been waiting for the moment to unleash it on the world. And I've literally seen people who, they've come out of prison, started running, it's turned their whole life around. And then they've gone on to build running communities. I've seen people who kind of have, come from the streets and had kind of quite hard lives where everything is a confrontation.
Yeah.
Just become less confrontational people. One, because they know they can run away from confrontation. And secondly, they know the power of self. I often say to people that people get into arguments and conflict when they don't know their power. When you hang out with MMA fighters, boxers.
Oh, yeah. They're the coolest people.
They are so cool.
Chill.
They're so chill because they know their power.
Yeah.
And so they're very good at diffusing situations before they even begin because they don't see confrontation as a way to test yourself. And I think for a lot of people, we're taught that the way that you test yourself is to have a confrontation, have an argument.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone who's ever won an argument.
Yeah, no.
So, unlocking the power within is a really powerful thing. And I just wanted to share that with people, particularly young people, because I think that young people are often demonized. There aren't many options for them. It is a confusing world because adults will always tell you kind of like, I don't know why you're acting this way, because in our day, you didn't have social media. There's all these things that we did not have that kids have to navigate with. And often they're having to do it by themselves. And so, that's kind of how the Run Dem Crew story began.
That's really fascinating. Community, is this sort of nearly seems a buzzword. Everyone is talking, we need more community. It was like, but what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean, the community we need? And what do we need from it? And why do we thrive?
I say to people that we need less community and more movements. A movement can bring change. A movement is powerful. Communities often, particularly communities that are supported by a brand, when the brand pulls away, often that community dissolves. And so I like to build movements now because movements empower people, as opposed to a community where you can just be part of the community, but not really have a voice, not really have a say, and not really be seen. I think there is a quest for belonging that people need because people are lonely.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I think have never been as lonely, not as connected, but also never as lonely.
Yeah. And I think social media encourages this idea of disengaging with the world, disengaging with people, and re-engaging with them via a screen. And I like face-to-face interactions much more than digital interactions. And it's just, I think, particularly after COVID, when people spent so much time by themselves, they need to be taught how to kind of be around people again.
Yeah.
So I think there's a place for community, particularly communities that are run by people who actually come from community, not from marketing. And it has become a bit of a buzzword. And just because you've got 200 people in the same clothes, that's not community.
No, that's right.
It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, and it's also longer lasting.
Longer lasting. And the community for me has to be intergenerational.
Yeah, I think so too.
As well. And it also, I think, great communities consist of people who are different.
I love that. I also love multi-generational parties. I think where between the grandma who's dancing and some teenagers, I still think that's the best.
Yeah. I mean, I always say to people like, that's why I had the ultimate respect for wedding DJs.
Yes, that's right. They have to incorporate everyone.
They got to incorporate so many people and make so many people happy. But you can see what happens at a wedding where you have got all of these different generations of people and they're all united in this idea of celebrating love. But those are the parties where kind of, it goes to a next level of freeness and expression, and they're brilliant.
If I arrive now on, let's say, do you still run at night?
Yes, we do.
Okay. How long do you run?
We run 5K now.
5K?
Yeah, so it's about 3 miles.
Okay.
And we run as one group,
Okay, how large is that group normally?
We've really slimmed Run Dem down. So in our heyday, we'd probably be getting 250 people a session
Oh, wow.
weekly. You know,
Do you nearly need an organization of your route?
we never run routes.
Ah, okay.
We always run to places of interest.
So
Because-
you incorporate some sightseeing?
Yeah, most definitely. Because I think it's a chance to explore your city. And I know a lot of, again, when we were talking about this idea of taking ideas from different, I hang out with a lot of black cab drivers. So the idea of the knowledge. So they were like, infinite different ways to get to the same destination. So what's really exciting is taking people away to a place they know, but they've never been that way before. And, running it as one group just means that everyone gets to run with everyone. And, that's sometimes a challenge because sometimes you get the alpha males and they turn up with all the gear and they want to show you how fast they can race you to the traffic lights. And then you just like, great, brilliant. But now you're going to go and run to the very back of the group to find the last person, go around them and then come all the way to the front. Once they've done that a few times, they kind of calm themselves down.
Okay.
Because as I always say to people, running is not about speed.
Yeah.
Because one person's slow is another person's long. So what I find is I meet people like, oh, I can't run fast, I can't. And then 6 months later, they run from LA to Vegas. Because they've just locked into that steady pace and they can do it. And so that's the reason why, with London Marathon, we always say to people is come and watch the marathon in person, but stay for the 5 hour, 6 hour, 7 hour, 8 hour people, because that's where the real stories unfold. That's where you see the real resilience. People who are running marathon in 2.5 hours, 2:15, they don't want to be on the road for 5 hours. Their bodies would break. It's too much for them. They want to get it over and done as quickly as possible. But turning up to run 26 miles, knowing it's going to take you 7 hours, I have the ultimate respect for you.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's my whole thing with this, talking about running in a different way and then making it as welcoming to as many different types of people as possible.
You said that vulnerability is a superpower. How do you manage to be open and vulnerable?
Because I realised that we need people who are willing to show vulnerability in public in order for society to change. The story that we've been told that you have to be strong at all times and you could never show weakness is ridiculous. Because what that results in is more conflict.
Yes.
I can't show you that I'm weak, so therefore I have to pretend that I'm stronger than I really am. Oh, really? Okay, well now let me test you now. This is how you end up with wars. This is how you end up with conflicts.
Absolutely.
And I just thought to myself, actually, I don't want to be one of the people that continues to contribute to that narrative. Because I spent a large time of my life pretending to be harder than I actually was. Pretending to be stronger.
To put out the wall.
To put the wall.
Yeah.
Because especially when you grow up in Peckham, in South London, in the 70s and 80s.
You couldn't afford.
You couldn't afford to show people that you were vulnerable. But as an older person, I'm like, what am I scared? What's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah, that's the real power. That's the real strength.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's okay to cry in public. It's okay to admit that you're having a down day. It's okay to admit that you're struggling. It's okay to ask for help. It's kind of, because when you do that, what happens is you help yourself get back on top.
Yeah.
And then you continue on. And I was talking about this yesterday, is like a lot of people are very scared to go through uncomfortable moments.
Yeah, or because it hurts or something.
Yeah, they let the uncomfortable moments define the rest of their life. But we need to learn how to pick yourself up and keep going.
Yeah, and seek help. That's the strong moment. Yeah, and that's the vulnerability.
You spend a lot of time around children. You soon learn to kind of to reframe the way that you look at life. And and that's kind of one of the big lessons that I've learned, is just from hanging out with my kids and just kind of seeing how they navigate life is quite interesting.
There's so much talk about the modern generation and they're all not doing anything and they're lost and this and that. What do you think, what in your perspective do they need?
They need to have more opportunities where they can shadow people who are older than themselves and see. They need more opportunities to be mentored. They need more opportunities where they can be listened to, like really listened to. They need more opportunities and spaces where they can vent and they can talk about how they're feeling. And, they need to be in situations where they're not completely demonized and written off before they've even had a chance to have a bite of life.
I know.
Because at the moment we're kind of, you speak to a lot of people and they're like, the kids are out of control. And they've said that about every generation.
Every generation.
Every generation has had that. Our generation had that. Their generation will have that. The generation after will have that. But it's hard being a young person.
Yeah, especially today.
You don't have a voice. You don't really have any power. You are often told what to do and how to do it. In an education system that is, quite outdated in the way that it doesn't necessarily prepare you for life. And, I always say to people is kind of, in no time in my 40-year career has anyone ever asked me what my A-level results were.
No, I'm always saying the same. No one ever asked me anything about that. And man, was it important at the time.
Exactly. And I've never had to apply Pythagoras theory. There's so much stuff that I learned in school that I've never had to use outside of those walls. I think we just need to prepare young people for life a bit more.
Absolutely.
Because they ultimately, at the end of the day, they are the future. So the same people that you're demonizing and saying that they have no self-worth and they're this and they're that, those are the people who are going to be making decisions on your behalf when you're older. You might want to start nurturing them so they remember to nurture you.
Well, in my experience, I've had many even talks about that, where people say, yeah, and they're so stupid and they are so lazy and God knows what. I say, hold on a second. When was the last time you actually talked to a representative from that generation? We failed them in many regards because we haven't adapted to the modern, very fast-paced world to actually, educate them, to probably build them up for the life we're living in.
Most definitely.
I know you've also mentored a lot of creative young people.
Yes.
So how do you do that? How do you guide without to direct?
That's interesting. What I do is I run these weekly sessions where I kind of will either reach out to people or they reach out to me, and what I give them is time.
Yeah, that's the most valuable asset
and I
we
give
have.
them my time.
Yeah.
And we spend that time basically coming up with strategies that they can follow so that they can achieve the dream that they want to have. Because essentially I always say to people, when I'm mentoring people, I'm trying to turn you into a leader. Because when I walk into a classroom as a 54-year-old, people are like, he's my dad's age or my granddad's age.
Mm-hmm.
As a 20-year-old walks in, they're like, wow, that's like my older brother. He's quite cool.
Yeah.
And we could be talking about exactly the same thing, but it's more acceptable from the younger voice. So again, it's just about kind of finding what is it that you're trying to chase? How can we put the steps in place so that dream starts to happen? Again, like applying a marathon.
Yeah.
Same strategy you apply to training for a marathon. It's the same strategy that I apply to training for life. And then it's just being there when they need you and not being there when they don't.
Yes.
Because it's not about you, it's about them. And again, it's taken me a long time to learn. And I've had some great successes and some failures. But I've kind of worked out a way that generally works quite well. And also challenging people as well. When you challenge a young person to not accept low-hanging fruit, don't be content with low-hanging fruit. Dream big. Think big ideas. Because if you do it, then that means that another young person can do it.
Do you think that the influence of social media and us being so very passive, because, we're not very many are very active, creators. They are really just passive consumers.
Yeah.
Does that really play into that field of, if I go for anything, I'll go for the low-hanging fruit? Is that sort of encouraging that more? Do you see that?
I think what's happened is society celebrates low-hanging fruit. It celebrates people who are quite mediocre. And excellence is kind of sometimes downplayed. If you're told enough times that the hamburger from the hamburger chain is the epitome of top food. And you see it in the advertising around you all the time.
Yeah.
Eventually you're like, yeah, you know what, that's what I really want. So when someone comes and offers you something nourishing, you're a bit and unfamiliar, you'd be like, I don't know if that's really kind of for me. Let me just take this. So again, it's just about reframing the way that people think and exposing people to opportunities that open their mind. Because I always say to people, the big thing for me was being seen by people who were older than me, who saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself.
Yeah.
And then being able to point it out to me and then help me recognize it in myself. Really, really important for people to do. There are not enough adults who spend time mentoring and giving back to anyone other than themselves, particularly young people.
That's
I always say to everyone,
so true.
Every adult has a responsibility to be mentoring at least one young person in their community.
Absolutely. For all listeners out there, that is a mantra. Go out and find a young person that you can mentor.
Yeah. And or if you're not mentoring, go and learn from a young person. Because again, it's kind of, you learn so much from being around people who are younger than you.
I love being around young people.
Yeah.
I always learn a lot.
Yeah. You know, but I think what happens is a lot of times we think that we've got nothing to learn from anyone who's different from us or younger than us or older than us. It's kind of, and actually that's where that's where you get you hang out with those people, they make you reframe the way that you look at the world.
I think that's also so wrong these days because our world is changing so fast. So if you have that attitude, you won't go anywhere because we have to constantly learn because it's just the change is too fast.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's, people, again, get celebrated when they say, for example, I've never read a book. And they'll be like, people are like, oh man, that's really cool that you never, that you don't read. And then eventually what happens is you get found out. And so I would say to people is kind of, don't buy into the rhetoric. It kind of reminds me of kids at school who are like, I never revise. I just turn up to the exams. And then you find out they've really been revising.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you're like, oh man, I wish I hadn't drunk the Kool-Aid and I'd actually revised as well.
Yeah.
That was a big lesson for me.
Yeah.
Just kind of results day.
If there's anyone out there, especially younger people feeling at their lowest, what advice would you give them?
Right. Okay. So the first thing I would say is you need to introduce a morning routine into your life of positive affirmations.
Okay.
So before you're engaging with social media, you might want to spend 5 minutes looking in the mirror, repeating to yourself, I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm loved, I'm important, I'm here, I have purpose, and whatever else works for you. Then start having a look at what you're putting into your body, both physically within food, but also mentally in the stimulation that you're bringing into your life. Start documenting what it is, because a lot of us don't really understand how what we put into our body, how it affects us. And so, become the CEO of your own life is my advice to any young person out there. And so drink more water, sleep more, introduce a form of exercise into your life that you can maintain. It could be a walk, could be a run, it could be gym, whatever it is. But introduce some form of movement into your life. And again, your environment as well, where you spend your time. Does it inspire you? And if it's not inspiring you, spend time in some places that can inspire you, because you can find inspiration everywhere. And I just think it's kind of, life is not supposed to be easy. This is the first thing that I would say to people. It's not supposed to be easy. So once you understand that, you then start making the steps and plans that you need to make it as comfortable for you as possible. A space where you can thrive. And if you need help, go and ask for help.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Probably also remember that we're also lonely these days. Loneliness is a big factor.
Yeah.
It's like the humans don't thrive in loneliness.
Exactly.
Even though if you're standing thinking that in front of your phone, you're not.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we don't thrive alone.
Yeah. Limit your social media as well. I think we are being suckered into this world where we're being made to think that, and if you don't engage with social media, then you're missing out. And I don't agree with that. Some people thrive in social media. Some people do not.
Yeah.
So be honest with yourself about how what you're seeing in your phone makes you really feel.
How do you handle social media? I know that you have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with that.
I use it when I need to use it. I don't use it when I don't.
Yeah.
I feel under no obligation to show up. If I'm not feeling on that day, then I'm just kind of not engaging with it. I'm not afraid to mute people as well. Or unfollow people who basically, make me feel a certain way. And that's kind of how I use it. I use it as a business card.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't use it as my therapist. I'm not using it to amplify what I do or make me feel like I'm more important than I really am. I always say to people is like, once you understand how the algorithm works, then it's really easy to disengage.
That's right.
Because the algorithm loves drama.
Yeah.
It loves it when you're spilling your woes.
Yeah.
It loves it when you get into conversations with people. And I can't reward the algorithm with that energy.
No, that's right.
It's no good for me at all. So I look at it as, what would Beyonce do? That's my big thing.
What would she do?
The one thing I've noticed about Beyonce is you never see her going back and forth with someone on social media.
Yeah.
She doesn't argue with people on social media. It's a business card. Doesn't necessarily if she's documenting her life and sharing her life, it's quite clinical in the way that it's done. And so what I realize is the people that I look up to and respect and am inspired by, they use it in a certain way. Yeah. And I try and follow the way that they do it. So you're not going to get a rise out of me. Because I know there are people at home who are bored and have fast Wi-Fi and a lot of time in their hands.
Yeah.
And their mission every day is to basically interact with people so that they can have a reaction that other people can observe. I don't entertain that in any shape or form. That's what the delete button and the block button is for. That's what protects me. And if I don't protect myself, then I can't show up for my community.
I have done the same. I've been hated and stuff online with big time, and I don't even go there.
So there's no point.
Speaking of Beyonce, I have something I want to ask you. It's I call it whatever, the Charlie's mixtape. I don't even know what you say mixtape anymore.
Yeah, you can say mixtape.
Yeah, mixtape moment. Yeah. So if your life had right now where you are at had a sound to it or a song, which one would that be? It's
something quite euphoric and uplifting, because I do wake up in the mornings and look around and think, wow, I never thought I'd get to this point. Yeah. Well done, Charlie. Let's keep going. So it's definitely something happy. Something like Good Times by Chic. Yeah. That would be playing. Okay. Loudly. Probably something funky by James Brown. Yeah, cool. Would probably be playing as well. Definitely something, that people can sing along to. I love that. So that's where you see yourself in your life right now. That's, there are obviously days where it's not as bright as I'd like it to be. And there are trials and tribulations that I face on a daily basis, but I just don't let them phase me, because I know they're temporary. Yeah. The thing that running has taught me is pain is temporary. And if you can push through it, amazing things happen once you cross that finish line. My purpose in life is to bring joy and positivity to the lives of every person that I interact with. That's my purpose. I love that. I feel sort of that I can run now, even if you have that penguin coming. You can definitely run. But what a fantastic time here with you. Thank you so much. So many great insights. And I feel happy and invigorated. Good. And I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking your time today to come here and talk to me. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah. Thank you. Charlie Dark, what a guy. He has the most incredible energy. I feel completely motivated by him. And I now really understand why he's had such a huge impact on the people he's met and the communities he's brought together. He has inspired so many people to get moving, either through music or through running.
and there seems to be something in his soul which is constantly propelling him forward. You can find more about Charlie and his music and Run Dem Crew in his show notes. And whilst you're there, please hit follow to hear lots more from the really inspiring guests on How Do We Manage.